Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Exploratorium Berlin. My name is Matthias Maschat. Here at Exploratorium, I'm caring for our theory and research things. And the event tonight is taking place in that context. And I'm really happy about the project that we are going to present here tonight. For me, it's something quite special in a way. In improvised music, it's very much about the pure sound, about the interaction, rather abstract things, and the sheer presence of the performer and stuff like this. And I always find it's really fascinating when it's also combined with certain meanings, when improvisation is put in a certain context, and when there's a certain idea that you are following with the art that you are doing on stage. And I'm really grateful to Matthias Mainz, who proposed this project to me. It's taking place in our Leeways series. This is exactly the place where we are taking some leeway, where we are trying to look for what else you can do with improvisation apart from only playing music. The project is called Carry On, Thinking from the End. It's a multi-year transdisciplinary project cycle by the Icelandic, Canadian and German artists Angela Snæfellsjökuls Rawlings, welcome, Sorbara and Matthias Mainz, as I said already. And the topic tonight is where improvisation intersects with the rights of nature, tempoception, improvisation, poetics, ecosystems. A lot of interesting words put together in this context. So on the one hand, I'm really looking forward to the performance, the lecture performance that we are seeing. Afterwards, we will immediately meet here for a talk, maybe a talk with you also, where we are going to discuss all these questions. I hope the mobile phones are switched off already. And then please welcome Angela Rawlings, Sorbara and Matthias Mainz.
Fortsättningar, prepositions. Fortsätta, president. Fortsättning. Ett. For. Ett. Ingar. Prep. Ad våra, ad vetra. To become spring to become winter, ad vetra, ad vora, ad jökla, to become with glacier.
Is a glacier made of water? Isn't a glacier an ecosystem? Is a glacier a tourist destination? Isn't a glacier cold? Is a glacier melting? Isn't a glacier fragile? Is a glacier a landscape?
In Icelandic, the word for
Is a
glacier is
a
jökull
landmass? Is a glacier
or
a place to
jökla.
enjoy? Isn't a glacier a space where the sublime unfolds? Is a glacier large? Isn't a glacier a word?
There
Is
are
glacier supporting
300
human
words in
existence?
Icelandic that include
Is a
jökull
glacier moving?
or
Is a glacier
jökla
bottled
in
water?
them.
Isn't a glacier a love?
In the next
Is a glacier an
150 to
economic
200
source?
years,
Isn't a glacier an entity
all
with
of the
its own
glaciers in
inherent
Iceland
value?
will have
Is
melted.
a glacier crying? Isn't a glacier a persistent body? Is a glacier cool? Is the glacier in slow motion? Is a glacier moving? Isn't a glacier surging? Is a glacier retreating? Isn't a glacier living? Is a glacier an accumulation? Isn't a glacier a compressed mass? Is a glacier a sculptor? Isn't a glacier used for domestic purposes? Is a glacier a landform? Isn't a glacier a body of water? Is a glacier an ancient river of ice? Isn't a glacier an archive of ash and snow? Is a glacier a mountain? Isn't a glacier fresh water? Is a glacier solid? Isn't a glacier dead? Is a glacier going down? Isn't a glacier an indicator of climate change? Is a glacier safe? Isn't a glacier sacred? Is a glacier saved? Is a glacier made of water? Isn't a glacier an ecosystem? Is a glacier a tourist destination? Isn't a glacier a whole? Is a glacier melting? Isn't a glacier fragile? Is a glacier a landscape component? Isn't a glacier a landmass? Is a glacier a place to enjoy? Isn't a glacier a space where the sublime unfolds? Is a glacier large? Isn't a glacier a word? Is a glacier supporting human existence? Isn't a glacier moving? Is a glacier bottled water? Isn't a glacier a love? Is a glacier an economic source? Isn't a glacier an entity with its own inherent value? Is a glacier crying? Isn't a glacier a persistent body? Is a glacier cool? Isn't a glacier in slow motion? Is a glacier moving? Isn't a glacier surging? Is a glacier retreating? Isn't a glacier living? Is a glacier an accumulation? Isn't a glacier a compressed mass? Is a glacier a sculptor? Isn't a glacier used for domestic purposes? Is a glacier a landform? Isn't a glacier a body of water? Is a glacier an ancient river of ice? Isn't a glacier an archive of ash and snow? Is a glacier a mountain? Isn't a glacier fresh water? Is a glacier solid? Isn't a glacier dead? Is a glacier going down? Isn't a glacier an indicator of climate change? Is a glacier safe? Isn't a glacier sacred? Is a glacier saved? Surge, fall, erode, melt,
Surge,
unload,
road, melt,
rebound,
fill, run,
flow,
retreat,
carve,
press, crack,
curve,
jog,
valve,
quake,
advance, slide,
discharge,
run, retreat, evaporate, disintegrate, compress, form, ablate, deform, accumulate, crawl, crack, jerk, quake, thaw.
Motion to chill. Reason for chill. How we perceive our glacial relations may inform human survivorship on a transforming planet. To wit, modern-day humans and their ancestors have only ever lived within icehouse Earth environs. As inhabitants who evolved within the Quaternary Ice Age with its alternations of glacial and interglacial periods, human habitability and survivorship on the planet has been intrinsically linked with the presence of ice sheets, ice caps, glaciers, and permafrost. With the tipping of 7 of 9 planetary boundaries, Earth's icehouse veers towards a premature entry into a greenhouse period. Untested for human species is a climate much hotter than any human has ever lived within. When humans recast ourselves as glacial beings, what can we learn with glaciers as our mentors? We as in any human who wishes to be included within this we who relate. As in any human who is a we body, relating as an ecosystem within an ecosystem within, as preposition for setninger, meant veers towards into of within that have only ever as a than any intended to the also learn with as inhabitants whose survivorship and their ancestors as beings. What can we beings, boundaries, glaciers, and permafrost on the planet has been intrinsically permafrost. This motion, cultural drivers as reason, as chill. In support of this, roughly 11,700 years to date.
Retreat. To practice the glacial vocabulary, spend a day in a retreat.
Pick up one stone at dawn. Drop the stone at dusk. What is your first memory of a glacier, Joe?
To practice the glacial vocabulary, spend a day in a retreat. Release. To explore glacial movement, spend a day releasing all you have stored.
Glaciers lead by action.
Unload. Surge.
They instruct
Fall.
through showing doing.
Erode, melt, unload, rebound.
Is a glacier made of water?
Flow,
For
carve, curve,
ecosystem
curve,
Isn't a
advance.
engagement.
glacier an
Slide,
ecosystem?
run, retreat, evaporate.
Is a glacier
more
a
than human
tourist
Disintegrate,
communion.
compress, form,
For
Isn't a glacier
Ablate.
cold?
consultation.
Deform.
Is a glacier melting?
For a
Compress.
geosemiotics.
Accumulate. Crawl.
Isn't a
For-
glacier
crack, jerk,
fragile?
quake.
A glacial
Thought.
vocabulary.
Discharge. Thin.
Is a
loosen,
glacier a landscape
lose,
component?
terraform,
For
pluck,
humans.
carry, shift,
Isn't a glacier
anchor,
a land
move,
mass?
heave, leave,
For
cover,
subverting
Is
the
a
status
glacier a
quo.
place
spread,
to
expand,
enjoy?
detach.
For
Yes.
pronunciation.
Isn't a glacier a space where the sublime unfolds?
For sound.
Is a glacier large? Isn't a glacier a word? Isn't a glacier moving? Isn't a glacier
And
a
so,
love?
how to lead by experiential through the for and or
Isn't a glacier an entity
Of-
with its own inherent
as-
value?
of to
Isn't
where
a glacier a
glaciers
persistent
still
body?
as we
Isn't a glacier in
Within
slow motion?
bodies
Isn't a glacier surging?
call our if
Isn't a glacier living?
and
Isn't a glacier a body
we-
of water?
and
Isn't a glacier an
weird.
archive of
weird.
ash and snow? Isn't a glacier dead? Isn't a glacier sacred?
Ai ue a ue e air u er e uri a e a eo o aueri a o I au or io e e What? What? What is a glacier?
Thanks a lot.
I was about to introduce my guests a little bit. I will still do this. It's maybe a bit formal, but it's not wrong, I think. So we have here Angela Snæfellsjökuls Rawlings. I hope I pronounced this correctly, but you will tell me later. She's a Canadian Icelandic interdisciplinary artist, researcher and poet, working primarily with languages as material for explorations. For exploration, she holds a PhD and published quite a few books. And in 2024, she founded Snæfellsjökuls Rawlings, which is Icelandic for Snæfellsjökuls as president. This is the first Icelandic organization for the rights of nature. To my right is Matthias Mainz. He is a transdisciplinary musician, curating artist and author. He is specialized in exploring issues of transcultural music and its embedding in national and international cultural policy. For this, he did research in Kabul, Tehran, and Istanbul, for example. And as managing director of the platform for transcultural new music, he realizes curational, musical, and artistic scientific works. And also here is Joe Sorbara, a drummer and percussionist, and as a musician he has performed and recorded with quite a few greats such as Anthony Braxton, Marilyn Crispell, Joe McPhee, Evan Parker, or William Parker. He's also teaching a lot. He is now the artistic director of the Guelph Jazz Festival, and he's also writing a doctoral thesis in critical improvisation studies. So that you know a little bit about our guests. Angela, maybe I can start with you. You're involved in the global movement about the nature rights. Could you outline this a little bit, what this is all about, and why this is concerning you? And maybe you can also explain the story or tell us the story of your second name in this context.
That's great. I'll try to storytell out of it rather than answering directly.
That's wonderful.
In 2010, I started the process of immigrating to Iceland. Before that, I lived in what is currently referred to as Canada, which is where Joe and I met and kind of existed within the same community. And when I immigrated to Iceland, I was in the process of learning about how the political system there functions. It's different than what I was used to in other spaces. For example, there's both a prime minister and a president. The president in Iceland is largely a figurehead position, not holding very much executive power. And as I was kind of learning through this, going through the immigration process, one day I was out in the western peninsula of Iceland called Snæfellsnes, where the glacier Snæfellsjökull sits at the very end of the peninsula. Snæ means snow, Fell means mountain, and Jökull, which you probably picked up already, means glacier. And when I was out there with the glacier, learning about how the political system works in Iceland, and also with the knowledge of recent rights of nature gestures that had actually taken seat in both Ecuador and Bolivia, I had the idea, well, what would happen if a glacier could be president?
That is großartig. I love it.
And I was like, maybe I'm going mad, or this is the best idea ever. I'm not sure.
Yes.
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 So I kind of tucked that in my back pocket. One of these kooky ideas that you bring up at a dinner party to make everybody giggle a little bit. And then last year, in January 2024, I decided that I should make good on this. And so I asked about 50 of my closest friends who are humans if they would be interested in actually doing this, because the election was actually going to be running for the president. And so we did. We nominated the glacier for the presidency. We requested permission from the glacier. We went out and asked specifically and listened. And yeah, so the rights of nature it's now become a kind of movement globally. And it really, as I mentioned, kind of takes hold within Ecuador and Bolivia with putting the rights of Mother Earth or Pachamama into the Constitution, 2008 Ecuador, and shortly afterwards Bolivia made a charter for the rights of Mother Earth. Throughout the 2010s until about mid-2010s, Maori peoples in Aotearoa, or what's also referred to as New Zealand, worked very hard to enshrine legal personhood for the river Wanganui. And there's this gorgeous documentary called I Am the River Is Me, which I very much recommend. And one of the Maori elders in this documentary says, well, you know, it's just this kind of Western legal system that would need this notion of a rights of nature. This doesn't need to be otherwise enshrined or encapsulated within many different indigenous societies or cultures. Being in interdependent, interconnected, respect-based relations has already been going on for a very long period of time. And it's really only through acts of colonialism that have stripped away that kind of interrelation, that ecocentric position, that we kind of see this big focus on humans and less so the interrelations, the interdependence that humans have with our ecosystems. So I think the rights of nature kind of emerges out of that, and especially with the Glacier for President, or Snæfellsjökuls Rawlings, part of what we are doing is trying to provoke public conversations about, well, why do we have the political and legal systems that we do? What would happen if we could shift them somehow? And also, how might we do this in a way that's actually a bit of fun or brings a bit of joy along with it as well? It's a bit of a different swerve away from a shame tactic of like a late 80s, early 90s environmental movement. So yeah, that's a very long-winded answer.
I still may continue, maybe. So you're working not only as an activist in that regard, but also as a poet and performer, as we have seen. So how do you take this topic into your art form? This is, I think, the central idea behind your poetry and performances.
Yeah, exactly it is. Thank you for the question. Well, the collective with whom I work, Snæfellsjökuls Rawlings, we've been thinking about our gesture as a kind of artistic intervention aimed at socio-legal innovation. And I think that's actually been a pretty strong driver of mine for about 25 years now that I've been working as an adult and making art things. With my first book, it's called White Slumber for Lepidopterists. I spent about 5.5 years writing this long poem from 2001 to later in the 2000s, where I was really interested in seeing what would happen if I took two subject matters that normally don't hang out. So I took sleep and dream studies and lepidoptery, which is the study of butterflies and moths, and kind of bred those together. And through that, I kind of raised this question, well, what happens at night for an entomologist, a person who studies butterflies and moths, when all day they've been in intimate or even violent interactions with insects? What happens when they're then sleeping and processing this kind of interaction? So that long poem, over 100 pages, kind of focused on that peculiar entanglement or kind of a half processing that would start to happen through language, a language that that deforms, deconstructs, where the sense starts to turn into nonsense at a point. And I worked solely with the pronoun we in there as well, as a way to maybe pervert the notion of who is this we? Is this we insect? Is it human? Is it both? Is it neither? Yeah. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is I'm really interested in identifying things with which I'm super familiar and I probably take for granted, and seeing how I can bring a renewed or refreshed understanding of them. First and foremost, for me, that's my mother tongue, which is English. I grew up understanding, okay, English, has to be spelled this way. We put the words in this syntactic order. And at a point, this is just a system, a structure. And there are many different ways that we could be ordering words. They may not be standard or conventional ways to order them. There are many different ways that we can relate to them through their sensorial properties, what they sound like, what they look like visually, how we move with them. So going into that path helped me stop taking English or my mother tongue so much for granted. The more that I could see, the system, we can kind of play with it and move it around. And then also seeing, well, what other kinds of systems are we in? Okay, we think about political or legal systems. We think about societal structures. We think about our ecosystems that are undergoing so much rapid transformation right now.
Matthias, you always wanted something more with music. I mean, you're musicians first of all, but you always followed this idea, what else can I do with it? So, for example, you have this transcultural perspective, and you always had the interest to combine cultures and so on. And with this project, I would also say you have a certain interest. Where do you see the potential here of using music, using poetry in this context, for example, the nature rights?
Sorry, I have to think about that. When you say I always wanted to do something more with music, then that sounds like music isn't enough. That's never how I felt, actually. The thing is that I'm very fast. No matter what I do, I'm coming to some point where I have like an itching feeling that something's not right somehow, and there's something that I obviously think isn't right, is that music, as all art forms, but music especially, is used in many cases to represent other ideas. So music is representing national ideas, but it's also the musicians themselves. They identify with certain ideas about their music, which in part is politicized or political. And I think very often there's a misunderstanding that music itself, or for worse, being a musician, is like closely related to some political stances. For example, the jazz or the improvised music scene, very often people think that there's something very closely to like core democratic values or something because of the form of communication. And of course, you can think of that if you think about the mechanisms, how the communication is dealt with, and in German you would say der Ausgleich von verschiedenen Adressen, the agendas. Everyone has like, you have a bunch of improvisers, and everybody has got an agenda. They want to play certain ideas, and they have to level them out while they do it. And the more the senses are involved, you have to sense the others in terms to think about the space in between the people and so on. So that's true. These are questions about like democratic processes, or about, but they are not per se good or bad or better than something else. But for sure, music is political in their contexts. So who's playing for whom, what are the spaces the music is performed, and what ideas are put onto the music from the outside to represent other ideas. So I don't think that we can start a group and do some certain kind of art, and this will immediately change the world in some perspective. I don't believe that. But I think as an artist, you can create a space in which you pick up topics or ideas, bring them together in a way so that somebody else from the outside can experience it, and it can maybe open up doors into like thinking differently about things, but not in a way that it's on purpose. You know, it's not didactical. You cannot like say, well, we're constructing this or this idea and transform it into an art piece, and then we give it to the store and somebody else buys it and he unpacks it and folds it, and then this idea jumps out. That doesn't work that way, I think. What I found very, very, very appealing in this context is to say, well, we can transform a non-musical topic in the music or in the arts. So we can concern ourselves in a very deep way with it, but there's a context outside with projects that deal with real world problems, and it's not necessarily artists trying to change the world, but there's people involved from all kinds of disciplines. So it's parallel processes that are there, and we can be part of that within an arts project. And that's why I'm trying to create contexts in which both things can happen at the same time. Does this answer the question a bit?
I think so, yes. I mean, you're obviously right that it's not necessarily enough to just say improvisation is something political and so on. What I liked about your proposal and about this project was that it kind of starts from this notion, but it also gives some concrete content to it. So it really connects, let's say, the values of improvisation to certain important question. I mean, very important question, actually, for the continuation on this planet, I would say. And yeah, this is what I liked about the idea, that it's
you know, when I was listening to the answer of Angela, I remembered that, I mean, I came to this project because Joe and me, we've been collaborating for more than 10 years now, and we wanted to do a new project, and Joe and Angela know themselves for even more time, and he proposed, let's try to do something together. So that was just an initial moment to start some new work together. So of course I did some research and, you know, internet research, and looked up the topics and so on. And I found a quote by a right-wing North American organization referring to the project about the glacier from Iceland. And there they said, I think we have to treat this artistic left-wing liberal ecological idiots as serious as they treat themselves, because if they advance with their ideas, and if these ideas are taken serious, we can forget our economical system. So, and this is interesting. So here you can see, I mean, there's like the opponents, yeah, are in the game somehow. Yeah, so there's a real world impact to it, and I find this like very, very fascinating. And then thinking about the rights of nature, it's not nature rights. It's the idea is to have a nature body and to grant in person rights, because the obscene reality of law and economics in our world is that global player companies are granted person rights, and this leads to some really, really strange tensions in law situations on national, on local, and in international situations. So the strategy is to say, okay, then we'll grant nature bodies, person rights too. So at least the situation is leveled on a jurisdictional, is this right? Jurisdictional level. For me, that raises like a lot of other questions that then again fall back onto us as musicians, because to have such an idea, to think of such an idea to work, you still need a functional system with checks and balances. So you need liberal democracies, and you need international systems with reliable rules, you know. And very obviously, we're in a time where all this kind of reliability is eroding. It's eroding on an international level. We see this. We're talking about the right system, the international right system in terms of Gaza, the Völkerrecht, about this erosion of this kind of rights. But we have this on a local level too, on national levels also. So it affects us as in our societies directly, and it affects us also as acting singular people within our communities. So here I think the preservation of spaces where minorities still can act and defend their stances and their agendas, you know, on all these different levels. I think the topic is like the program is touching all these different parts. Yeah, so I mean, this is so it's not only fascinating. I think it's necessary to go that way, and I think we can perform arts in this context in a way with a consciousness, and also trying to define methods of like fighting for this for the situations. Does it work? I think in German I could be much more precise. I hope.
I think you're doing good. Don't worry.
Does everybody know? Do you know that the first that in Europe there is legislated a lagoon in Spain called Mar Menor? Yep, and this is the first body of water to receive legal personhood. And the German government is actually the first international government to also recognize Mar Menor as a legal person.
Okay. Wow.
Right. Yeah.
Spanish.
Yes.
I'm sorry to tell you, Mar Menor is completely flat. And all the waste of the land conserved. It's full of algae. Nothing can live there, and nobody
Did you know that the reason why they sought legal personhood for Mar Menor is exactly to address this issue around ecocide there?
Still, I'm sorry. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
If you have the magic wand, then you're welcome. I mean, seriously. But that is the same everywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's important what you say, because just because this is regimented within different legal frameworks, it doesn't mean that that's the end solution. Okay, great, it's saved forever. We see within Ecuador right now quite a strong push by the right-wing government there to upend what has been placed within the constitution since 2008. We see this also with the more, is it Vox? I can't remember. The more right-leaning within Spain is also, within Murcia is also challenging and threatening for this legal personhood to be taken off the books. Yeah, so it's not like it's just a magic wand and it's suddenly there and it's good. It's actually a first step to then have a kind of legal jurisprudence to take action to find better modes of protection, preservation, sustainability, resilience, whatever term you might want to use that way. Yeah.
I would like to come in here. we need to go deeper with that. And it's not just a mind game to say that a glacier or a river has a personality. It's much more than that. We really have to listen to the indigenous traditions. They relate to nature in ways of an other. The trees are the older brothers of people. And we have to really dig into that. Then we cannot, like you did, Matthias, talk about the real world. There is no real world. What we perceive as world is constructed. And it's mainly constructed by the idea of a separation between an observer and an object. The First Nation people don't know that. They know relation. They don't know an observer and an object. And we have to integrate that view in our worldview. And then we can find solutions for the challenges we have. If we don't do that, all the other ideas are nice and they can move some things, but basically we have to shift our awareness and our perception. And when we do that, it's obvious that we are on eye level with everything in creation. And when we shift our perception in that way, we can no longer harm nature, because we know that harming nature is harming ourselves in a very direct way. And so I think we have to go on that level, and so I appreciate it very much in your performance, the role that the words that were not spoken had, the silence that was in between, because I think that's the space we need to shift our understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, I like you said we who relate. This was part in the performance, and this you put it also in connection to the ecosystem. So it was, I think it's not so far from what you just said. Yeah, when you said that.
No,
yeah,
we're
yeah,
in complete agreement, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same with our Spanish friend here. We're in complete agreement. Oh, sorry, but it isn't possible to just have these big steps taken. Okay, great, solved. Everybody has an ecocentric, interrelated way of being in the world, and our political systems totally agree. It takes incremental steps. So this notion, I mean, the elder in Aotearoa is saying, we don't care about rights of nature, legal personhood. It's just a step to help find a little bit more of a conversation between one particular worldview and another instituted one there. You're right. That's what's needed for human survivorship on this planet. But how do the we who chooses to be the we that's included or not within this, how do we come up with different strategies for attuning? And then I'll say kind of, I know you probably have a question, but I'm jumping in. So I'll say one of the things that I've been working on lately is thinking through what a glacial vocabulary might be. And I mentioned before, most languages in the world, they have something written so we can see it, something auditory that we hear. Many languages have something that's movement-based, whether it's when we're reading and we're moving our eyes, or when we're speaking, the kind of choreography of our vocal folds, teeth, tongue, etc. So if meaning within human languages is kind of transported on these vessels of sensorial material, how might a geosemiotics or a biosemiotics potentially be transported on other sensorial materials? Maybe those ones are other ones. And so I've been thinking through how to attune to what a glacial vocabulary could be. And I started with movement first. So you heard at a point, especially Joe, saying surge, unload, melt. So all different actions, movements that glaciers take. And as humans, we can also figure out ways to surge, move forward quickly, what does it mean to melt, to fall, etc.? How could we potentially find an embodied relation with that? And in some respects, that kind of attunement that's more embodied, more felt, and less about being clever with our concepts and our theories, that, at least for me, feels like a way to potentially learn how to be in relation with more than human or ecosystem in a way that's different from what I've grown up understanding. Yeah.
I would like to answer, like the both of you coming from another side. I'm thinking maybe the growing tension between the dependency of our societies from the economical models we're living in and the coming catastrophes of ecological change. Maybe the catastrophes are just coming, and maybe it's really too late for us to save these situations. But I think nevertheless we don't have any other chance than to adapt in a way that we try to find solutions and fight for fight for, even if it's small steps, like the next possible steps to take. And I think that the bigger ideas, like, I mean, to grant nature bodies person rights is a strategy. So it's already something, yeah, it's not like the super big picture, like how can we immerse ourselves and go back to another state of dealing with ourselves as part of nature. You know, it's still a strategy, but it's also very, very big picture. And I think this can help us to at least attune or adjust ourselves in terms of asking questions, finding new solutions, like from moment to moment and from time to time. And I think this is the only chance we have. For me, the title "Carry On Thinking from the End" is a game of words that leaves like two options open to understand it. One is like everything's lost, the end's coming, it's near, you know. Okay, but we carry on and we try to deal with it. The other possible way of understanding is you have to think an idea through and create options, search for options, thinking from the outcome in the long run, you know. So you try to do something that's like really sustainable, stable, that makes sense and that leads somewhere. And I don't think that any of us can really decide upon something right now that will fix things like for real. We just have we have to go on and to carry on and to see how to do this.
So I'm sorry I didn't really integrate you up till this point yet. But I'm really curious to hear your perspective too. You're coming from a really interesting research environment, I would say, in Canada, the ICASP. There, one of the basic ideas, I think, is how improvisation can influence society. So the question is really big, or the expectation which improvisation can do to society is really something, I would say. And this is maybe a nice example here. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about this environment, where you're coming from, where you are working, where you are active, and how you, for example, relate to this project here?
Yeah. I'll try and find a small personal path through the question. So in around 2007, I grew up, this project is in Guelph, this small town about an hour outside of Toronto, where I grew up. And I was, had had been living and working in Toronto for many years, and was called in 2007 to the university in Guelph to teach this large ensemble that was really whatever I wanted it to be. And I chose to continue with the tradition that had been begun by a wonderful flautist and educator called Ellen Waterman, that this was an ensemble that worked with improvisatory musics, meaning musics that hold space for improvisation. And so I was in a unique position to be teaching a group of students how to be improvisers who weren't necessarily invested in being improvisers. They didn't know that this was a thing. I had to not only show them that this approach, this methodology, this whatever it is, exists, but kind of convince them that it was valid, kind of convince them that it was okay, kind of convince them that there was a path toward an art making practice through this thing. And so what I realized is that I could play and I could show them through playing, but that in this particular context it didn't work. And so I needed to find language to talk about the music. And it just so happened that in other rooms in the same building and at the art gallery across the street and connected to the jazz festival that I had fallen in love with, was this project that was just that was people getting together to talk about improvisation and very heavily invested in the music. And so I took up, I started hanging out and eventually did a master's degree with these folks, and I'm currently working on a PhD with these folks, very much trying to find language to talk about this, and interested in the ways that different people talk about it. And one of the things that has been most interesting to me is that when you talk to improvisers, those who will actually admit that they have that they can talk about it, because many just say, oh, you can't talk about that. There are lots of people with very specific ideas about what their practice is and what it isn't, and they'll universalize it and they'll generalize it and say the improvised music is this and it's not this, and it's very to listen to them speak about it, this person shouldn't be able to play with this person because they're thinking about it in such disparate ways and yet you can hear them play together and it's great. So I'm very interested in the ways then that this way of musicking brings together contradictions, brings together different ideas about what it is, the kinds of difference that can come together and be celebrated in the music. So that's my kind of investment in the project, I guess. And in the project, meaning that critical improvisation studies world that I'm connected to, but also in this one. So what a wonderful thing to be able to bring. It's just kind of a pile in a way, right? We're three people with really interesting perspectives on things. We're all very curious. We're all very opinionated. And it's been fun to, in these kinds of situations, which we've now done over the last few days, listening to Matthias talk about this project and listening to Angela talk about this project, and then listening to myself talking about this. Like we all come at it in such different ways. Just even the tones of our voices, and like on a sonic level even, it's so different. But yeah, so then there's this pile of approach, of thought, of sounding, of caring, the different ways that each of us care, the different ways. It's just such a wonderful pile to wade through and search through and discover. And the cool thing about the music is it's, in a way, it's like this kind of conversation. And you were saying about like just finding new kinds of strategies, new kinds of approaches, this is what we're doing in the music all the time, right? We stumble upon a constellation of sounds, and we say, what if this is a music? And we explore it for a moment, or two, or three, depending on the least patient person among us, and we go, huh, and maybe we learn something from it, and then we move on and we find another constellation, and we develop over time different strategies to encounter these unknown or semi-known spaces and negotiate and have different feelings about them, from this is great, or I came up with this brilliant thing and you idiot over there decided that you were going to play that bullshit. What's going on? You know, there's a lot of emotion in it for me, and but this kind of group collective negotiation is wonderful. But I also think that that's what we're doing in this conversation about all of these questions. And so, yeah, so my interest is in exploring the pile that we make together in all these different ways, and then traveling around and getting to know different places and the people in those places and the more than people in those places, and adding to the pile and just seeing what we can learn.
When you finished the performance, I heard you say the word tempoception. I think it was about the perception of time, how long it was right now, and so on. And tempoception is pretty central in the title. So you have tempoception, full stop, improvisation, poetics, and ecosystems. To be honest, I had to think about it and do some research about this word because I didn't know it before. And I'm really curious to hear you explain what you mean by this word and how you use it in the music, or how you transfer it also to the meaning that you are attributing to the music.
I'll take this. So from 2015 to 2020, I pursued my PhD, and it was cross-listed in 4 different departments: theater and performance studies, cultural geography, geology, and archaeology, which is like a hot mess to have supervisors or professors from all these different departments trying to have conversations. And the result of my research, I came up with a series of text or performance scores that I was thinking would help me to think about how to perform geochronology, or deep time, within the so-called Anthropocene. And in particular, I was interested in thinking about how to attune to multiple temporalities that are well outside of anything as humans were likely able to conceive of. I understand what 30 seconds feels like, 5 minutes, 45 minutes, 2 years, maybe 20 years. I don't really know what 100 years, I don't know what 1,000, we get into million and I'm just like, it's just numbers, it's just statistics somehow. So thinking about the Earth itself as a planet being 4.6 billion years old, and then, you know, like all of these different eons and epochs, how to get any kind of a sense of what those larger temporalities, or larger to me, what are those like? And then also what kinds of temporalities are present within like big weather systems that might be moving around the North Atlantic, or the crabs that crawl up onto the shoreline. So I was actively thinking through these more than human temporalities, but also my own sense of temporality. And through that, I came up with the term tempoception. So I'm thinking about perception, but how to tune into different temporalities. And my biggest experience in practicing attunement with temporality has always come through improvising music. I find that I am able to get a sense just through the practice over and over and over again. I know that you were like, I have no idea how long that went. It's very different for me. I'm like, yeah, no, that felt like this long and this long. Okay, interesting. So I've actually found it really useful as a temporal attunement practice, which then gives me a sense that maybe I can continue to practice that attunement to temporalities beyond this kind of human way. That's my answer.
And Angela talks about knowing 30 seconds and knowing a minute and knowing, and I suppose I have a vague sense of those, but what we just did, honestly, that could have been 5 minutes, and I would have, you could have said, oh, that was only 5 minutes, and I would have believed you. I get lost. If I'm doing it right, I get lost. Mm-hmm. And so, and then not only that, but I have an experience a lot of time where I can watch myself, and I know that I'm doing things quickly, but I can actually see a slowed down, like I'm experiencing a slowed down version of time somehow when I'm lost in the way that I aim to be. And so, these are other tempoceptions, right? And so this terminology is super fun to play with, but yeah, also, like you're saying, your experiences with this word and what it means and what it can mean and how it can mean. I have a different take, and I'm sure we all have a different take. So the music again kind of gives you a different twist on all of this, and this is the research project that I'm connected to. Is like, okay, there are these perspectives that the music brings that are potentially helpful. So let's explore them and take them into other realms and see how they help. And my particular version of that is actually, I kind of feel like the project, maybe somebody's watching. I kind of feel like the project got beyond the music too quickly. And so my interest is in digging very much back into the practices of improvising musicians and finding other things to think through in these other contexts, but even in the context of itself, because again, a lot of musicians don't even like talking about this stuff, so I very much do.
What I also thought was really fascinating is that the way you played, for me, it really sounded a lot like, to put it simply, like nature. So there is a lot of things just happening. They are related by your interaction in a way, but it doesn't sound like it all the time. It's just like things are happening here and there. And I thought it was really fascinating also how this connects to the idea that the music also has this kind of natural or organic development and so on. You don't agree?
It does. I don't think uniquely though. I mean, you have a lot of improvised music in this space, and to me, we weren't doing anything different than I hear the people on the wall doing. I'm wondering if the topic we bring gives you a different perspective on, which is which is ideally.
I'm probably biased in that aspect. That's true.
But don't if you think through, if you grow it and think through the last year's concerts, and is there something unique about it, like more natural about this than, or do you know?
No, I mean, there's a lot of people playing that way, obviously, and but it maybe is the same idea. I mean, when I'm thinking of John Cage, who wasn't necessarily an improviser, but he just liked the sounds to happen without having this relation, and this was something rather just listening what was going on without the wish to create certain connections. So, and of course, this was very influential, and it's happening all the time. So, but I've since it's the topic, maybe I've been hearing it strongly also. Yeah. I was also wondering if you would like to talk about your work with Paul Dutton, the Canadian poet. Also, so this is something where you could have a common. You have common ground in working with him, and I would really like to hear your experiences with him and what it, how it influenced you, maybe, and also your connection. Who would like to start?
Yeah, I think I was surprised to learn that this is our connection. Actually, I didn't know that. That there's this. It's like a chain of connections that kind of emerged after each other. I met Paul Dutton in 2012 in Cologne because a curator friend of mine learned that he was playing in Paris and invited him to get us both to play together. And the following year, I had the possibility to go to Canada to work with him, and he suggested to work with Joe. That's how we met. And from then on, we just been in touch, and we developed projects involving Paul or around him. So this is like the founding, the initial situation. When we met in Iceland in April, the three of us, because I didn't know that before, that Angela too was part of a local scene in Toronto that was, I don't know if it was like if centered around Paul Dutton or if it was just closely related or somehow in touch or something like this. But there's a certain connection like each of us had with Paul, right? And also in maybe in over similar periods of time, or so this is something that connects us. I mean, I didn't know that. It was obvious at the time we talked about it.
I'll speak briefly.
Yeah. Or not so briefly.
I really appreciate that you brought up Paul. You know, Paul passed away this year, and within a Canadian context, and sound poetry in particular, Paul has been a really important, wonderful, difficult figure. Paul and I met in 2001. He used to be part of the sound poetry Quattro, the Four Horsemen, and one of his collaborators was a professor of mine when I did my bachelor's, Steve McCaffrey. And yeah, Paul and I were just in the same like literary scene, really. I ran a monthly reading series for about 5 years with a wonderful friend, and Paul came to every single event. We did have one of the months we had a special event that featured him, and we called him Tender Dutton, like a little play on Gertrude Stein's book Tender Buttons. And I think my favorite Paul story, which he would roll his eyes if he knew I was saying it. There was a book launch one summer, and he showed up on his bicycle because he went everywhere on a bicycle, and he came straight over to say hi. He reached his hands in his pockets, and he pulled out all of these peas. He said, "Do you want a pea?" Because he had these like peas that he'd just taken out of his garden, and they were covered in lint from his pocket. Such a weirdo. We loved him for his eccentricity and curmudgeon. He like carried around his own soapbox to stand on and, rant.
Yeah, it's funny. My Paul story is connected to his garden too. He was very obviously invested in me, and I loved that and tried to take that very seriously. He was also a difficult person to be around for a long time. He was, curmudgeon is the right word. And so there was a time when he had this pear tree in his backyard, and he would invite you over to take some pears. It was very clear that he wanted you to come into the backyard and hear about the pear tree and hear about the pears and recognize that he was harvesting these pears and eating them and preserving them in different ways and eating them he really lived out of his garden. There was a time, I have 3 kids, 2 of them are twins. There was a time when I was super just chaotically busy, and there was this time when Paul really wanted me to come and get some pears, and I kept saying yes, I would come, and then not being able to do it. And I was able at one point to say to Paul, I need you to understand that I recognize and appreciate that this isn't really about the pears. This is an offer of friendship. And I want you to know that I recognize the offer of friendship and I really appreciate it. And it is my intention to come and get pears. My life is just such that right now it's not. But he, breaking through this very kind of masculinist notion that, men need to have a thing. Men go to baseball games together and drink beer together. They don't just be together. And breaking through this and saying to him straight on, I recognize that this is just you wanting to be together with me. The friendship that was like he was reaching for just solidified in that moment. And so, that's my favorite Paul story. And I actually, when his pear tree eventually died, and I have it in my backyard. He cut it down, and I went and helped him cut it down, and we loaded it into my car, and I have it. So I have this intention of having like a kind of memorial bonfire to burn this tree and set it off, and and I say that celebrating my relationship with Paul, but I do need to say, like, it was a pretty tumultuous thing. And I got to know him another way, working with Matthias and being challenged to try and look through his poetry, look through his writing, and try and translate into music some of that writing. And I think I did some very successful work in that too. And all the ways. This is done. This relationship and these relationships have done so much work for me. I'm very appreciative of it all.
I'll say one more thing about Paul. I was improvising we were both vocally improvising together at a point, and it was really fun, really intense. And we kind of came to a pause, and I was then kind of describing the experience of improvising together and how I was listening to what he was doing and then like picking up X, Y, Z. And he said, no, don't listen. Don't you dare listen. I never listen. So he was adamant that he just would start to improvise, go in, he would pay no attention to what anybody else was doing, just locked in, and that is the way to do it. And I was like, and then I told you about that, and you're like, yeah, sounds like Darren.
Yeah, he believed this wholeheartedly.
I don't think it's true, though. He was listening.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, the three of you, to that point. Maybe there are still more questions and remarks. We moved on a little bit from the initial topic of the nature rights and the connection to improvisation, but we can also go back to this if you would like to ask something.
I don't need that.
It's that there are people online who are listening and they would like to hear your question.
Sorry. So what I found very interesting is that with the little sounds that you made and with your voice, I really had the feeling I came in a situation that I thought, is this the glacier? This comes down. Is this? Is he pressing the wood, the leaves? What is going on? Does he make some sounds? What do you think? Oh, this is, oh wow, it's scary. Yeah, you don't know. He has his own energy, and you were talking to the glacier. I think this was really nice, and you did a very nice playback to that. No, I do. You know what I mean. So no, it was really nice because it was really magic. You know, I'm singer too, but I never heard you somebody sing like that. So you're really crazy. You're really crazy. And I think the idea to make a glacier for a president, I would suggest that for the USA, because they have Alaska. So they could make a president in Alaska, you know, instead of Trump. What do you think about it? What a good idea. So?
Do you have any friends in Alaska?
No, unfortunately, but perhaps you, because you're in Canada and so. That would be nice, huh? Good idea.
Anything would be better, really.
I don't know what I'm going to say. I mean, I really don't know what I'm going to say, but other than thank you very much. It was so stimulating to experience the performance and also this trio, or quartet if you want, and the way you've interrelated and connected these different themes together, and I just found, I was just kind of questioning myself and questioning what you were doing and questioning what you're saying, but also just questioning myself about how, I mean, I confess that I also think a lot about improvisation and ecological matters, and my daughter's studying environmental science. I'm very proud of her, whereas I'm an improviser, but we have great conversations because I also write about improvisation, and just the way that you're dealing with this topic is in this very nicely integrated way between sound, and obviously the grand piano represents a history of music that's symbolically in the room as well, and the kind of nuances and waves between the different things, and the way that Joe's working with percussion, but in this very advanced way that's so understated, and you know, and you've got you've got, is it leaves and twigs and the rest of it together with the voice, and I want to say thank you. And just one thing more specifically, I love the way that the performance was completed by what is a glacier. So I mean, it's just in a way like questions are the best thing.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wanted to say, what was your name again? Gina. I think one of my investments in this pile, like I said, is kind of exactly what you brought up. Just putting these things together makes you hear a different way. Yeah. You could have heard this concert we could have pretty much done the same thing with a different pile of texts, having it not be about glacier at all, having it not, right? And you would have had a different experience of the same sounds, but somehow just putting this here invites you to listen in a way that's related to the topic. And maybe that's all this does, is just invites you to listen in a different way. And I think even if that's valuable, you know. Because I think this is a reaction to my, I actually think this is a very successful project. I've been really energized by it and kind of opened up by it, because I'm very cynical about the idea that we can kind of put politics. I think there's a politics in the music already, right? I do think it's very political. I do think there is a politics in it. But the idea that you can just kind of cram these things together is, can you? Can we music about glaze? Like, right? Is this a thing we can do? But I do think that at the very least, here we are having this conversation, and we're talking about all these things mixed together, and here you are hearing in this hearing in this way differently. So yeah.
I want to say something more. It's not only the hearing, it's that I get pictures. It's like a film. Suddenly you see the glacier and you see something. So when do you little sounds and you do your wonderful sounds, not the playback only. No, it's no, it's all. Really, it's like a film. For me, it was like a film. I saw it.
Yes.
And I wished the glacier becomes president. So.
Yeah, I like when you said you wanted to go back to talk about the music, and for me, the way of improvising and what I've been doing in the spiritual world and in the political world, it always was connected. And I think for me, the major connection is the way how I move through things. And so it's always at the same time a diversity of sounds, approaches, attitudes, and at the same time holding it in one space so it's unifying. And to hold it in one space requires at least acceptance of the reality of what is. And my spiritual teacher, she always said, like, seeing things as they are, that is love. And seeing things with love allows them to move into the right direction. And I think that's what we do in music if we succeed. And that's what we need to do also in, like, what you say, the real world, the world that's out there, or however we want to call it. Actually, for me, it's also, there's also as much out there as it is the world that takes form versus the unformed, the potential. But this kind of moving through it, that is what I feel is unifying it through all the different streams.
I'm not sure if I can say it correct in English, but I try to. So I was thinking about that if you call a glacier or a river a touristic person, it's something about that a river or nature, there are thousands, millions of microorganisms. So it's kind of collective. And you also have this in your improvisation that you are singularities, but you are as well collectives, and you are building a corpus of sound together. That's what I was thinking about a lot when I was listening to you.
Exactly. Well, you said that beautifully in English. I'd love to hear it in the other languages.
I've been discovering myself as a non-binary person for the last 8 years and a couple days, but more directly in the last decade, and getting through a kind of recognition of that in myself is one thing, but I'm now in a very playful place with it, where the English. So I use in English they, them, theirs pronouns rather than he, him pronouns, and I've been playing now with this very multiplicity. Like, actually, I think you said this the other, like, we are all they, or maybe, no, Tanya said this. You say we are all we. Tanya said something about we are all they. Yeah, we are all a multiplicity, literally in terms of organically, but then also so many different versions of ourselves that show up in different contexts. And yes, I do think that as many us's as can show up, or as many we's as can show up in any given situation, there's something pretty beautiful about that too. So yeah.
I really like that you said singularity rather than individual.
So I'm really happy that you came to Exploratorium to present your project, both in a talk and in a performance. And so it's an ongoing cycle, which which ought to be continued, which will continue. And I can tell you that also here at Exploratorium, we also already have a date for it. So in end of March, I don't know the exact.
It's going to be end of April.
End of April, okay. End of April, you will be here again, and with more people, we hope. Still working on it, but we will follow up to to see how your project develops. Thank you very much for coming, Angela Snæfellsjökuls Rawlings, Sorbara and Matthias Mainz.
Thank you, Matthias.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah,
Really
thanks for
appreciate
coming.
it.